Hi lovely humans! Whether you're moving to Paris for the very first time or you've been here for a few years but you're still not sure that you know what the fuck you're doing, I got you covered. I'm Clara, a French gal who's been living on and off in Paris for the past 5 years and grew up in the suburbs of Paris, so I know the area. Since I've lived in like 3 or 4 different apartments in Paris, I have done my fair share of apartment hunting. And also for those of you who have been following me for a while, you might have noticed that recently I have a different background because yes, I have moved yet again. But this video is not about me. In this video, I'm going to give you useful and very practical, concrete, detailed tips on how to apartment hunt in Paris step by step. This video is mostly going to be useful for, I imagine, younger people or people who are on not a super extensive budget, but you should find useful tips regardless. It's just my personal experience is about apartment hunting on a somewhat limited budget. First, I will tell you about the general housing market in Paris and the laws regulating it. Then we will talk about the different documents you will need to rent a place. Then I'll walk you through where to find a flat, how to find a flat, the typical apartment hunting process here. And in the end, we'll talk about how to avoid scams. In an upcoming video, I will tell you more about my current place, how much I pay for it, and I will tell you about past places I've had and how much they cost, so you have a general idea. And I'm also considering making a video about the different neighborhoods in Paris, the different arrondissements. So if you would be interested in that, please let me know in the comments so I can get right on that. So first, let's talk about the general state of the housing market in Paris. So Paris, like all the big cities in the world, has a very high demand as far as renting goes, and so very high prices. Not as high as, let's say, New York or San Francisco, but arguably on the same level as London and Zurich. So one of the most expensive cities in the world. Yeah, sorry. As of July 1st, 2020, so when I'm filming this video, this is very recent, new regulations have been implemented here to limit the maximum rent. So there is now a rent ceiling, and you will find in the description a calculator that gives you the maximum rent per square meter depending on the arrondissement, depending on the neighborhood actually. So it depends on where you live in Paris, and so it will give you what you're supposed to pay at the very max for a place depending on its size and where it is in Paris. However, this is all good and dandy, but let's be real, landlords have not caught up yet to this change in legislation, and it seems like a lot of landlords are not going to be willing to adjust to this because unfortunately they know that the demand is so high that if you point out to them that they're not respecting the maximum rent, they can just tell you, okay, well, go look elsewhere, I'm going to find someone who will be willing to pay that rent anyway. So I'm just giving it to you to keep in mind, and it can give you kind of a tool to navigate things, but it has its limit at this point. Still, legally, the minimum size of an apartment is 9 square meters to be able to rent it. There aren't that many places that will be under this size, but I would really recommend you to not go under there. I mean, some of you are already gonna be like, what, 9 square meters is crazy small. How would people accept an apartment smaller than that? Some people do. Also, I'm sorry if you can hear the church bell. There is a church like right in front of my house, and it's like end of Catholic Mass at this hour, so the bell might be going on for a bit. Rent is due every month, and the deposit for a flat is usually 1 month of rent without charge, sometimes 2 or 3 months of rent without charge. What are charge? What is included in this amount, this sum of money? Well, it depends on your landlord, it depends on the building, but at the very least it includes cold water and the maintenance of the building. So if there is an elevator, it might be a bit more expensive, etc. Sometimes it can even include hot water, sometimes electricity, sometimes even Wi-Fi. So you really have to ask your landlord what's included in that price, because if an apartment is a bit more expensive than another, but it has electricity and Wi-Fi included, of course, it's a much better deal. In general, what cost of rent should you plan for if you're trying to make a budget beforehand? This is a very hard question to answer because it depends on what your priorities are. what are your criteria in terms of size, in terms of views, in terms of equipment, in terms of location, etc. But basically, assuming you want a furnished place, studios around 20-25 square meters or bigger will put you easily over 900 euros a month without charge, depending on where you are in Paris, and a small one bedroom will put you over 1,100 euros, again quite easily in most places. If you're looking more at a studio between 10 to 20 square meters, then you will look more at 550 euros to 900 euros without charges, and that's the same cost for a room in a shared flat. Of course, this highly depends on your location. Obviously, the more central in Paris you get, the more expensive it is, and so I know it can be very tempting as a foreigner coming to Paris to try to be in those perfect places with the most gorgeous view, but you are paying a lot more for that. Really, you really are. And also, still being quite central, some places have a reputation of not being as safe, and so of course that gets the rent down a bit. If you look a bit outside of the Paris city line itself, along the lines of public transportation, you will find that of course the further away you go, the cheaper you get. You can find a very nice bigger studio or a room in a shared house or a shared flat for 550 euros or under if you are willing to have a longer commute. You can find a lot of places furnished, especially studios. Of course, the bigger you get, the least likely the place is to be furnished, and while room in flat share are usually unfurnished, you can often buy the furniture from the previous tenant. The legal requirement for a place to be considered furnished, and I'm going to read them, are that it contains a bed, something like a blind, a cooking hob, a fridge, an oven or microwave, basic utensils and cookware, a table, a chair, a lamp. If there is one of these elements missing, it's technically not furnished according to the law. You can find modern and old buildings in Paris. Paris is not all old, but in general you'll find that noise isolation is quite poor. There is almost never AC. I have AC in my flat, but that's like a rarity here. In old buildings, studios and very small apartments are usually either on the ground floor or on the very top floor. So usually like 5th or 6th floor, and that usually also means no elevator. Lots of old Parisian buildings don't have elevators. Studios on top floor of old buildings will often, most of the time actually, have the restroom be outside of the room in a separate room and might be shared with other studios at that floor. The reason for that is that historically the studios on top floors were used by the maids and servants of people living in that building, and so they would only need basic commodities because they were, well, the maids. I've also lived in a place where the shower room was outside and shared with one of the studio, but it is quite rare. Not a lot of units are pet friendly, but it is something that you can negotiate with a landlord. There are new rentals available all year round in Paris because there are always new people coming and wanting a flat and always new people living. If you're looking to sublet for a couple of months when you arrive, the ideal is the summer months. Leases for furnished places are usually a year, sometimes more, sometimes less, and leases for unfurnished places are typically longer. But in any case, the law says that you can get out of your lease without, like before the end of your lease, without any fee, with your deposit intact, etc., if you give a month's notice for a furnished place and 3 months notice for an unfurnished place. Now that you know about the general situation and rules, let's talk about what documents you will actually need to apply for an apartment in Paris. Landlords in Paris are notoriously difficult, even for French people, and though there are exceptions, they might ask you for a lot of stuff. So first you will be asked to prove your situation in France. So that will be your university registration if you're a student, certificat de scolarité, it's called in French, or your last 3 paycheck with your French employer. If you don't have 3 paychecks yet, 3 payslips yet, you can use your previous paychecks from back home and also your French work contract. They will also ask you for your last 3 avis d'imposition, so that's about you having paid taxes in France for the past 3 years. If you don't have that, you can also ask for the landlord what document you could provide for them instead. I would advise you to look for it yourself and see what kind of equivalent you could have in your country. Again, this is all about proving income. Whether you're a student or a professional, landlords will ask you to have a guarantor in 99% of cases. So a garant in French. This guarantor is there to say that they will pay for you if you don't pay rent. So the landlord can go after them to ask them for the rent you're not paying. So the guarantor will usually be asked a letter saying that yes, they are the guarantor, and also for their last 3 paychecks to prove that they have sufficient income to pay for the rent if they have to. A lot of landlords will require a French guarantor, which can be a pain in the ass, or they will require a guarantor that is in France. Also might be difficult, but you can negotiate. It can be done. Some landlords though will not budge on that, unfortunately. Both you and your guarantor will also provide a copy of your ID, and sometimes also will be asked to provide bills where you have your name on it to prove your previous place of residence. If you are entering a flat share, your lease will almost always have a clause in your lease saying that the tenants guarantor are guarantors for everyone. This is called caution solidaire. So basically, what this caution solidaire means in the context of a flat share specifically is that if you're paying your rent, but if one of your flatmates does not pay their rent, the landlord can go after their guarantor, but they can go also after your guarantor. Everyone is guarantor for everyone. So they can ask your guarantor for the money someone else is not paying. Yep, it is kind of fucked up. Some landlords and then all of the real estate agencies and all of the water, electricity and internet providers will highly prefer you to have a French bank account. So if you don't have one, if it's hard for you to get one, which it can be really hard, it would be better to go with private landlords as opposed to real estate agencies, and also to try to pick a flat where as much as you can utilities are included. Because if you go with a place that already has electricity and internet included in the price, you don't then have to worry about getting in touch with the providers and managing to convince them that your foreign bank account is okay. So yes, that's a lot. Basically, they will ask you for anything short of signing with your blood. However, they cannot legally discriminate based on age, race, gender, religion, sexual orientation. Legally, they are not allowed to discriminate you for a flat based on that. However, let's be real, some landlords will, and some landlords are actually quite blatant about being discriminatory. Yeah, I don't want to discourage you about coming to Paris. I don't want to scare you off. I just want to be very blunt, because I think living in Paris can be very romanticized, and someone needs to say it like it is, you know? Now, to apply to a place, you have to find it right. So how does the whole process of finding an apartment in Paris goes? Well, first you need to have your criteria in mind. Your budget, what's important for you in a place to live in, and what areas you do and what areas you don't want to live in. Regarding the neighborhoods, as I said, if you want, I can make a whole video talking about the different areas of Paris to give you an idea of what that all looks like. But if you've never been to Paris before, or if you don't know it well, I would really recommend you to get an Airbnb or sublet a place for at least a couple of weeks, so you can just get familiar with everything. You can go around, visit things, look at what places actually feel like, use the different public transportation, see what you prefer, decide if you want to walk, bike, etc. Side note, don't think about bringing a car or getting a car. Don't think about a car. There's an exception if you work or live quite outside of Paris. Also, before you're even actually in the phase of visiting places, take a while to check the different listings so you can really get familiar with the prices and integrate kind of in your brain the whole market and know what kind of prices seems right and kind of prices seems wrong. So where do you check listings? Of course, one of the first place you can go to is a real estate agency, but they can charge very hefty fees. And as I mentioned, they're not so good with foreigners applications, so I would really not recommend you to go that route. One of the most commonly used websites is leboncoin.fr. So it's kind of like the French Craigslist in a way, but with a slightly better reputation than Craigslist really. And yeah, it is used by a lot of individual landlords, which are easier to deal with. And despite a few scams, it has a lot of very good, legit listings. Another website is pap.fr. And then of course you have all your Facebook groups, Facebook group in Paris. I will list a few down below. And if you're a student, check your university Facebook groups. You might be able to get ad for places from your classmates. Contacting the landlords is usually done by either text or email, and usually they will either reply through that medium or call you back. For your first contact, I would really advise you to use French, at least for the greetings, and if you can write the whole thing in French, it's better. Express your interest, ask questions if you have any, and also ask when and where you can visit the place. Some of the listing will straight up have in the description a time and place where landlords want you to just show up with your application file to visit. Some of the landlords will ask you to send your application beforehand by email, for example. That's quite common practice. That allows them to filter out people that they already know they don't want as tenant. When you're visiting the flat, ask again what rent and what charge include. Ask also what the typical electricity bill is like. Check the noise isolation, the water pressure, etc. Also ask them when they want the tenant to move in. Sometimes they want a tenant to move in a month away. Sometimes they want a tenant to move in like 3 days. So ask all of those good questions. Usually there will be many people visiting right before or right after you, so you might feel pressure to say I want this apartment because you see all of these people and you're afraid that they're gonna take it away from you. I would advise you to just be a bit careful with that, because if you have a bad feeling about a place, don't take it just because there are a lot of people who want it as well. Just don't go for that. But also on the other hand, there is no application fee. So if you're interested in a flat, you can just say, I'm interested, and head out your application file if you haven't already sent it. And yeah, you can just give your application file, say you're interested, there is no fee there. So you can change your mind later. You can say you're interested, and then when the landlord contacts you again, you can say, actually, you know what? Not interested anymore. That's totally normal for that, like for it to happen. That's a very normal thing to do. Don't feel awkward about it. So yeah, it's always kind of easier to apply to more places, even places you're not 100% sure about, but also don't force yourself to apply to places you really don't think are a good fit. It can take visiting anywhere from 2 to 15 flats, honestly, to find one that's a good fit. And you know, that's okay. Sometimes a neighborhood that you thought looked good actually is very depressing. An apartment that looked very pretty gets no natural light. A building that looked like it had an old charm is very poorly maintained. That all happens. When you find a place that you're actually really interested in though, show it. Be super enthusiastic. Smile. Try to connect with the landlord. Tell them about you. Make this a personal connection so they are more likely to remember you. And yeah, you know, of course there is like the application and stuff, but sometimes landlord gets so many applications for a place that how friendly you are can be a decisive factor for them. You will usually hear back from landlords between a few hours to a week after the visit, and you can absolutely contact them again if they haven't gotten back to you after a week. Definitely don't stop visiting places until a landlord has told you a place is yours. Even if you had a good feel about it, don't put yourself on hold, keep looking. If they say yes, congrats, you got a flat. You can usually kind of negotiate at that point when you're gonna be moving in. Typically on the day of the move-in, you would meet up with your landlord and you would check the lease, sign the lease, and then also sign un état des lieux d'entrée. What this document is basically you and your landlord agreeing on what the general condition of the flat is when you're moving in. So for example, what's the state of the ceiling? Is it very good? Is it very bad? What's the state of the floor in the kitchen? You agree on every single thing in the apartment and you sign a document that's basically a picture of the before you arrive there. And this is a very important step because this document will be used when you then leave the apartment to compare the state of the apartment before you and after you. and to check if any damage have occurred, and you could be potentially charged something, like you can lose a part of your deposit if there is a significant difference in your before and after. Also, on the moving day, you will usually wire them the first month of rent and the deposit, and they will give you the keys. So yes, you don't actually wire the deposit beforehand as like a booking fee. I know that I think that's done in some countries. You can sometimes sign the lease before the moving date, that's normal, but I would generally really advise you not to wire the first month's of rent and the deposit until you have the keys, until you have the physical keys. So this is all great, yay, we want the flat, we want the keys, but what about scams? How do we avoid them? First of all, use common sense. If the listing has pictures of a flat that looks way bigger than the size written in the description, if the equipment is very luxurious, if the rent is half the price of everything else in that area, this is most likely a scam. Just ignore them, maybe report them, and you can also, if you want to be sure, just reverse search them on Google Image. Secondly, if you contact a landlord and they're saying that they don't live in Paris and they have important family business to attend to, and so they can only come to Paris very quickly to make someone visit, so they're looking for someone to move in very quickly and easily in the apartment, and that's why the rent is lower. This is a line used by scammers. Like, this is the line so many scammers use, basically verbatim. So if you get that line, it's a scam, move on. Thirdly, of course, do not send any money before you've signed a lease, before you've signed anything. I know that in some other countries a booking fee is normal, an application fee is normal. It is not in France. It is not a thing. So if a landlord is asking you for a fee for them to make you visit the apartment, nope. Fourth, while some Skype visit might be legit and you can get landlords that are just like genuinely cool people and will give you a tour by Skype, I would really advise you not to sign a lease and pay rent for a place you haven't visited in person or you haven't had a trusted one visit for you. If a landlord or a place looks shady, don't hesitate talking to French people and asking for their opinion. Heck, if you want my opinion, DM me on Instagram, send me the listing, tell me, does that look legit to you? Always be critical, and if you're not feeling it, remember that there are so many new listings every single day, and you can find another one. You can just move on. Finding a place that you really like in Paris can be fucking hard. It's already really hard for French people, but it's even much harder for foreigners. But if you take your time, you're consistent, you know your rights and you know what you want, you can find really nice places. In an upcoming video, I will tell you about my current flat, which is only 660 euros, woohoo! And I will also tell you about previous places I've lived in. But I do want to tell you that I visited dozens and dozens of apartments, and I've seen so many places that I wasn't happy about, but I almost got them because I was so tired of apartment hunting and I just wanted a place now. But I waited, I looked, and I found good places. Anyway, I hope this video gave you useful insights and make you feel better prepared for apartment hunting in Paris. If you do, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to this channel if you want to see my next video, if you want to see also more content about life in France, cultural shocks, lots of different things. You can always request a video in the comments if you have like a specific topic you would like me to talk about. Leave it in the comments. You can also share your experience with apartment hunting in Paris, and also if you've apartment hunted in different places in the world, tell me how that went. Like, tell me the differences with where you come from, because that's always interesting. I have lived in China and the US and the UK, so I've done a bit of apartment hunting around the world, but I'm always curious to hear how it's done in different places. You can also follow me on Instagram if you want to see more of my daily life and my photography. Thank you for watching until the end, and I hope I will see you around again soon. Bye! Rent is due every month, and the deposit for a flat is usually... Oh my god, I did not think this through. I'm kind of hoping there isn't a wedding, because if there's a wedding, I'm fucked. I should, okay, mental note. I should know. I mean, I'm new to this apartment, so I'm not used to the fact that I live in front of a church, basically. But I should really make a mental note not to film on Sunday morning, because obviously